Joining me on the program now from Family First, Bob McCoskrie. Bob, kia ora, thanks for your time.
Andrew, good morning to you. Good to be with you.
This is sobering reading. This is absolutely shocking stuff. And honestly, even looking at these numbers, mental health for our young people is some of the worst in the world. And young people in New Zealand have no reason to live, it seems. Suicide attempts, suicide feelings, of course, depression, anxiety, all of those other things that go with this, some of the highest things in the world. The UN report doesn't say a lot about why this might be, but I'm sure you've got some thoughts and comments on that one.
Yeah, well, for those who are watching, obviously, if you're listening on radio, you won't, but this is the report. It's by UNICEF, and it's called Child Wellbeing in an Unpredictable World. Now, to be fair, it's not the whole world. It surveys the 43 countries which are part of the EU and the OECD. So it's the wealthy countries, and it looks at statistics between 2018 and 2022.
Can I just say, it's supposed to be the parts of the world where kids have the most opportunity. It's supposed to be the part of the world where there is blessing and abundance for our young people, which makes it all the worse in some ways.
Well, it's labelled as high-income countries, and yet those high-income countries are possibly doing worse than low-income. And so there's some interesting debate there around this whole income issue, which they do deal with. But look, let's just deal with some of the high-factor statements. So firstly, overall, out of 36 countries in the OECD, we're at number 32. So in terms of Premier League football terms, we're almost in the relegation zone.
Yep.
For mental health, though, we are the worst. And for physical health, we're 35th out of, they actually add a couple of extra countries, so it's 35 out of 41, so still right down the bottom.
Yeah.
Look, suicide rates. For 15 to 19-year-olds, we are the worst in the OECD. And it's not that we're just winning, it's that we're winning clearly or losing clearly.
Yeah.
And in fact, our rate is almost 3 times higher than the average for the OECD. Now, what's interesting, Andrew, is that if you look at overall data for suicide in the OECD, it's actually been decreasing. But New Zealand is still, unfortunately, ours has worsened despite all the, and I mean, it's sad to just see us going against the trend. We've got the second worst rate of bullying. And of course, we know that bullying is associated with depression, anxiety, suicide, ideation. We're the third worst rate of being overweight or obese, so the actual physical health is not too good either.
Yeah.
And then when they asked about life satisfaction, we were the 6th lowest rate. And what they found was that girls are much less likely to have high life satisfaction than boys. Socioeconomic status didn't make that much difference, which goes back to that original point you made, Andrew, that actually the wealth doesn't make the difference in terms of happiness and mental health. Exercising regularly, obviously, is good. High use of social media was bad.
Yeah.
Frequency of talking with parents was good. 80% of New Zealand kids said that they talked with their parents, although the measure of if you talked with your parents was once or twice a week. So that's a pretty low bar.
It's a low bar, yeah.
But the data did show that the more you talked with your parents, if you were talking almost every day, that you were likely to be happiest. So, I mean, I'm not sure it's telling us anything that we don't already know, Andrew. No. In terms of academic skills, we're slightly above the average in maths, and we're in the bottom half in terms of reading compared to other OECD countries.
Wow.
But here's the interesting point, is that the decline in the whole of the OECD in reading and maths, it didn't start declining during COVID, as many people would point to in lock-ins. It actually started declining around 2012. What happened in 2012, Andrew? That's when the smartphone really took off.
Of course.
And that's actually one of the points that was made by Jonathan Haidt in his book, The Anxious Generation, who we had speak at our conference last year, is that, the smartphone, basically our kids are being raised by the screen rather than being raised around play. Now, I guess back to your original question about what are the solutions, the UNICEF have done this report a number of times. So they did it 2003 and 2007, we heard a lot about UNICEF reports.
Yep.
Because that was at the time of the anti-smacking law, and so there was all this debate around child abuse.
Yeah.
And there was also a SIF report in 2006. There was a Children's Commissioner report in 2009, and they all found the same thing. They said that children are at risk, and these risk factors increase if there are, and you could probably do this list, Andrew, off the top of your head.
Yeah.
If there's parental drug or alcohol abuse,
Mm-hmm.
if there's family breakdown,
Yep.
and weak parental ties, weak family ties, if there's poverty and poor housing, and if there's low maternal age at birth. So in other words, teenagers having babies without the solid formation of the family and without the marriage. And we actually put out a report in 2016 around this growth of child abuse, and it was connected to the reduction in the marriage rate.
Yep.
You could see that correlation, or that inverse correlation. I did a word search in this latest UNICEF report for some of those key words like marriage, drugs, separation, family breakdown. They really just don't go near there. And I think that's part of the problem. UNICEF can identify the problem. We can see the bad statistics, but nobody's willing to talk about what you and I understand is to be the foundations of strong families, where there is strong marriage, low conflict within that marriage, where there is the family holding it together, kids being raised by their biological mum and dad. Those are some of the strongest protective factors, not only physically, but also mentally as well.
I mean, it's not rocket science to say, hey, we've got broken families, maybe we'll have broken kids. And that's not the only thing in the mix. As you say, there is social media, we had a lockdown, none of that stuff helped. But actually, when it comes down to some of the causal factors, if families are broken, if kids aren't getting the support, if they are hiding in their rooms looking at their phones, then there's no help for them. One thing I wanted to ask you, I mean, I had a brief look at the report. I haven't taken as deep a dive as you have, obviously. But was there any difference between the guys and the girls on this one in terms of the mental health of our young people? Now, traditionally, I suppose, both getting a hammering, but was that one of the details that the report covered?
I mean, we know from research that girls are far more harmed by social media than boys, mainly because of the visual, because there's a lot of competition around appearance, the sexualization, the objectification of girls. In terms of the suicide issue, I know that from research, girls are more likely to attempt suicide, but less likely to be successful, which is good. Boys are less likely to attempt suicide, but they will be successful.
Gosh.
So the boys' suicide rate is higher than the girls, but that doesn't mean that girls don't have higher suicidal ideation. I hope that makes sense.
I understand that, But I mean, this problem then, I mean, why isn't this all over the headlines? Our young people are dying at such a huge rate. We know some of the causal factors on this, but we seem to be distracting ourselves to death. Well, at least the death of our young people here. We should be shocked and appalled about this.
Well, I think we've discussed this, Andrew, and that the part of the problem with the whole debate, even around social media for young people, is that we have people yelling out, well, we can't have digital IDs because we just refuse to have digital IDs because something about privacy. And yet there is a trade-off. Unfortunately, there is a middle ground we need to find where we can say, okay, we don't want the government delving and telling us how to live our lives every day and in every action we take. But we also need to hold social media companies to account because we can see the mental harm that it is doing to our kids who are on their screens. But at the same time, Andrew, drug and alcohol abuse is a major factor as well. We know that. We know that a child is hugely at risk if either mum or dad or the live-in boyfriend are abusing alcohol or drugs. And yet I still see articles calling for us to legalize hard drugs because apparently the war on drugs has failed. Well, you could say the war on suicide, the war on child abuse, and the war on many things that that we struggle with has failed as well, but we continue to fight against them.
One of the things which I struggle with this report, I suppose, is yes, we can look at broken families and drug and alcohol abuse and social media and all of these sorts of things, but New Zealand isn't leading the way in terms of that. In fact, this is also the case, certainly access to social media, but also drug and alcohol abuse and broken families exists in every other OECD country and not necessarily at lower rates than here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. This is something which is particular to New Zealand, in contrast to some of the other countries that also have these problems. So maybe this isn't the causal factor. Maybe there's something disturbingly unique about our cultural situation at the moment, which is leading to such shocking statistics.
Well, exactly. And our national anthem starts, God Defend New Zealand.
Yeah.
And we really do. I mean, I agree. It's a Western notion that we are pushing away Judeo-Christian values, no doubt about that. But we lead the pack on so many of these negative statistics.
Yeah.
We have, low fertility rates. We've got very disproportionately high. I mean, this doesn't deal with child abuse rates, but we are kind of like this scientific test proving that when family breaks down, when marriage rates decrease, we will see the negative outcomes. And yet we just don't seem willing to talk about that. Some countries are starting to talk about it. I know that there are some European countries that are starting to say, hey, we need to encourage families. We need to encourage fertility rates. We want families to have babies because that's the role of families. We want to support them, give them the financial breaks. So there is that discussion, but of course, there's also pushback against it as well because it goes back to a traditional conservative viewpoint. Look, there was an article in the New York Times, which was reprinted in the New Zealand Herald just this week, talking about the fact that maybe pornography is not harmless. Wow. Perhaps conservatives and Christians actually had it right all along. Yeah. So there is a realization as the reality hits home, and I'm just hoping that there's, even just with the debate around social media and the harms that it is doing, and for us to see the suicide ideation, the rates of mental health harms in New Zealand, we've got to have this discussion. We've got to start making some changes fast, and we've got to start getting back to biblical truth.
Bob, you mentioned that doesn't specifically mention child abuse, but for our young people to have such awful mental health is a form of child abuse, and certainly not wanting to beat up on the parents necessarily, but as a society we have failed this generation of young people, and hey, if I was writing the report card, can do better is what I'd write in big red letters, because we must do better as a society for our young people and to give them some hope for a future. Bob, really appreciate the work that you do at Family First. Of course, people can find out more at familyfirst.org.nz. Kia ora, thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.